Chapter 15. The Forbidden Forest. Things couldn't have been worse. Filch took them down to Professor McGonagall's study on the first floor, where they sat and waited without saying a word to each other. Hermione was trembling. Happy Tuesday, Potterheads! Today we're talking about Chapter 15 and the underlying mythology that clues us in to who really killed the unicorn.
It was Voldemort. I mean, come on, it's obvious.
But first, let's go to the recap. Filch takes Harry and Hermione down to McGonagall's office, and McGonagall shows up with Neville, who got in trouble too because he wanted to warn them about Malfoy. McGonagall guesses that they made up the story to trick Malfoy, and this hurts Neville's feelings because he was trying to help them. McGonagall gives them all detention and takes 50 points each from Gryffindor. This makes everyone in the school except the Slytherins hate Harry. Harry tries to resign from Quidditch, but Wood won't let him. Then one day, Harry hears Quirrell's voice come out of a classroom, and it sounds like someone's threatening him. The kids guess that this means Snape has already made an attempt to get the stone. The next morning, the kids get a note about their detention. That night, they meet in the Great Hall, and Filch takes them down to Hagrid. Hagrid takes them into the forest and splits them up into two groups. He says there's something in the forest that wounded a unicorn and that they're going to try to find it. At first, Harry and Hermione go with Hagrid, and Neville and Malfoy take Fang. They run into a couple centaurs who say over and over again that Mars is bright that night. Then they see the other group send up red sparks to call for help, but it turns out Malfoy just scared Neville. So Hagrid sends Harry off with Malfoy instead and takes Neville with him. Harry and Malfoy stumble upon the unicorn, and there's a cloaked figure drinking its blood. Harry's scar hurts like never before, and the hooded figure comes toward him. But Firenze the centaur shows up and scares the thing away. Firenze helps Harry get back to safety, but pisses off the other centaurs in the process. Firenze guides Harry to understanding that the hooded figure was actually Voldemort trying desperately to stay alive. Then Harry tells Ron and Hermione all about it, and as he's getting into bed, he finds that his invisibility cloak has been returned to him with a note that says, "Just in case." We all know that J.K. Rowling did a crap ton of research before writing these books. I mean, you can take almost anything from these books, and there's like a ton of historical or mythological basis that gives us clues to its meaning. We see that a lot in this chapter, especially. When the chapter begins, the kids are in astronomy class, studying specifically Jupiter and its moons. We see more mentions of astronomy later in the chapter as well. The centaurs say over and over again that Mars is bright tonight, unusually bright. I don't know much about what they'd actually be learning from these lessons, as I don't know how much astronomy actually relates to magic. Maybe we'll unpack that in a later episode. Now don't worry, I'm not going to wade into astrology here. I think that wizards would probably think that that's a bunch of BS anyway. What I'm going to go into is something that is obviously much more realistic and based in actual scientific fact. Mythology! I'm kidding, I know that mythology is in fact, but it is way more interesting, and the fact that J.K. Rowling chooses to use these names can tell us a little bit more about what to expect, and what we all know is coming. Let's do some quick summary of the names we're told just to establish some context. Let's start with Jupiter. In Roman mythology, Jupiter is the god of the sky and thunder, and the king of the gods. He's essentially the Roman equivalent of Zeus, which you're probably more familiar with. Especially if you've seen the Disney classic and one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever created, Hercules. The other name mentioned, Mars, you may also know. In Roman myth, Mars is the god of war and bringer of battles. So when the centaurs say Mars is bright, probably not a good thing, guys. But we'll get into that. Mars was considered the second most important god in Rome, second only to Jupiter. Maybe that's why he was starting wars all the time. But seriously, now that we're all grown up, I think it's pretty easy to tell what the centaurs mean when they say that Mars is bright. There's a tiny bit of dramatic irony going on here, since we know that someone is up to something, whether that's Snape or whoever. So this isn't the most mysterious divination from the stars that the centaurs could provide. But things get a little more interesting when you dig into this. I was curious about the mentions of these Roman gods in this chapter. I mean, we all know that Queen Jo loves her Roman mythology and history. She uses it all the time, and there's one more connection to Roman mythology in this chapter that is not so obvious. And if you pay attention to the rest of the series, it's clear that J.K. Rowling also loves trinities. The Golden Trio, Three Deathly Hallows, etc. What if I told you that there are clues to another trinity in this very chapter? What? We all know that at the end of the book, we'll find out that the hooded figure drinking the unicorn's blood is Quirrell/Voldemort. And the connection to all this starts off with Quirrell's first name, which is Quirinus. It's just a weird name, right? Wrong! Quirinus is also the name of another Roman god, although there isn't a lot of information about him, just that he's like another war god kind of guy. And Quirinus is a part of something called the Archaic Triad, which was a grouping of three gods with, you guessed it, Mars and Jupiter. Boom! Another trio right in this chapter. But wait, there's more! One thing we do know about Quirinus is that the name was also an epithet, or another name, for Janus. Janus, also in Roman mythology, is the god of beginnings and endings, and since he is always looking to the past and the future, he is often depicted as having two faces. So boom, right away it's clear that Quirrell is the first member of this Harry Potter version of the archaic triad. So who are the other two? Also, pretty easy to figure out when you keep going down this rabbit hole. Mars is pretty clear who it is. I mean, if any character is going to be equated with the god of war in these books, it's Voldemort, right? But also looking into whatever. Looking into his creation myth, some parallels with Voldemort line up a little bit too. In a popular version of the story from Ovid, the goddess Juno gives birth to Mars all by herself. Cause she don't need no man. Juno, trying to restore balance from Jupiter having had kids all by himself, seeks out a magical way to have a baby. So she finds the goddess Flora, who uses a magic flower, boom, pregnant, baby Mars is born. Later in the series, we'll learn that Voldemort's mother, Merope, also uses magic to have a baby of her own that she wouldn't have otherwise come by. Merope uses a love potion on Tom Riddle Sr. to dupe him into marrying her, boom, pregnant, baby Voldemort is born. There are some other parallels that I won't go into right now because they're a bit of a stretch, but at least in this chapter, Mars is clearly meant to represent Voldemort. So that just leaves Jupiter. Who could he be represented by? Maybe Dumbledore? Yes, even though he isn't physically in this chapter, I think Dumbledore completes the Harry Potter archaic triad. Jupiter is the king of the gods. Dumbledore is the greatest living wizard. Mars is said to be the second most important of the gods, second only to Jupiter. We all know that Voldemort is afraid of only one other wizard, Dumbledore. Last thing is the way Dumbledore looks. Jupiter, or Zeus, is commonly depicted as being a powerful older man, long white hair, long white beard. Dumbledore! So I think it's pretty obvious that in this chapter, Dumbledore can stand in for Jupiter. So pretending like we haven't already read the books a million times and we don't know what's going to happen, you could guess from all this that the hooded figure drinking the unicorn blood is not only Voldemort, as Firenze will suggest to Harry, but is actually also Quirrell. Now, of course, no one is going to do that much digging when they read it for the first time, but I love that Queen Jo lays all those breadcrumbs and makes it so that you could actually figure this out on your own if you wanted to. One more thing that we can learn from this chapter. In European folklore, unicorns are symbols of grace and purity, and it's said that unicorns can only be captured by a virgin. So... And that's it for this week's topic. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Can we interpret Jupiter as Dumbledore in this chapter? Is Queerness Quirrell perhaps the hardest name to say in the wizarding world? Which one is a virgin? Quirrell or Lord Voldemort? Or both? And now for the most awkward segue in history, it's time for Parenting with...
Oh, Harry Potter!
Definitely both. Quirrell and Voldemort are virgins. And that's all for Parenting. No, I'm just kidding. What I want to talk about as a parent for this week is Firenze and how he is by far the most responsible adult in this chapter. Let's look at all the ways that Firenze essentially goes against all of the things that he's been taught as a centaur. 1, he intervenes in the affairs of humans. Centaurs just don't do that. They prefer to sit back and read the stars to see what will happen and then just let it play out. 2, he talks straight with Harry and isn't all confusing and vague about what's going on. 3, he lets Harry ride on his back, which just pisses off Bane and Ronan. And sometimes parenting can feel like this. Firenze is making the hard choices and doing what is right. In this analogy in my head, parents are Firenze and kids are simultaneously the other centaurs who are angry at you and Harry Potter who needs help and guidance. Kids can really be two-sided like that. There's the one part of them who's throwing the tantrum right in front of you, but you have to make the hard choice and not just give in to them. Just because the other centaurs are mad at Firenze doesn't mean that he's not gonna do the right thing. You've got to protect the good person you want your child to become. So you make the hard choice and do what's right for them, even when they're yelling at you for letting Harry Potter ride on your back. And that's all for Parenting with
Harry Potter song. Listen.
For this week's question, I am wondering, what exactly would this half-life or cursed life look like from drinking unicorn blood? Like, especially if it wasn't Voldemort doing this, someone who isn't just a lifeless form clinging to someone else's body. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And that's it for this week's video. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you really like what we're doing and want to follow along, please subscribe. We are so close to the end of the first book. And please, 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 please share this video with everyone you know. Your assignment for next week is chapter 16. That's Through the Trapdoor. We are so close to the end, you guys. So make sure you read that by next Tuesday. And until next week, happy reading. Knox! Like, for real, I'm pretty sure Quirrell and Voldemort are both virgins. Just think about it.